Among modern experts and travelers, it is commonly believed that a powerful sandstorm is practically a death sentence. A wall of flying sand supposedly brings all movement to a complete halt, instantly clogs the lungs, causes panic, and permanently robs a person of even the most basic sense of direction. It seems that surviving there without modern technology is simply impossible. However, the indigenous peoples of the harsh southwestern United States viewed this extreme and destructive natural phenomenon quite differently. For them, the storm was not an enemy, but an ally. Just imagine, while others were hiding in shelters, waiting for the end of the world, these people walked right through the wall of a dense storm with a completely confident, steady stride. They navigated their surroundings as easily as if the sun were shining brightly all around them, and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. How is that even possible without compasses or navigators? It sounds like science fiction, but it's a proven historical fact. Be sure to watch this video all the way to the very last second, because at the end I'll reveal the very secret technique of the ancient warriors that still baffles modern scientists to this day. You'll learn in detail how the legendary Apache Native Americans survived in the very eye of a sandstorm, with absolutely zero visibility, and continued on their path without fail. Believe me, this information will turn your world upside down. Are you ready to learn the truth about hidden navigation in total darkness? During sandstorms, the sky merges with the ground into a dense gray mass. A person instantly loses their usual visual landmarks and begins to wander in circles. The Apache, however, developed a unique internal compass system based on tactile sensations. They relied not on their eyes, but on the pressure of air currents against their skin. An ordinary traveler tries to make out at least the silhouettes of rocks or trees through the sand. This quickly leads to eye strain and a complete loss of direction. The Native Americans used a different approach, closing their eyes or looking straight down at their feet. They focused all their attention on exactly how the wind currents struck their shoulders and backs. During a desert storm, the wind rarely changes its general direction abruptly or unpredictably. The wind blows through narrow corridors, forming a constant vector of force. The warriors memorized this vector even before the storm reached its peak intensity. They noted the angle at which the grains of sand struck their travel garments. By keeping this angle constant, they could walk in a perfectly straight line for hours. Any deviation from the route was immediately felt as a change in the pressure of the sand against their bodies. This type of sensory navigation required many years of training in open spaces. Young people would venture out into the wasteland at the first signs of a rising wind. They would blindfold themselves with a thick cloth and try to walk from one hill to another. Mistakes led to long detours, but gradually the body memorized the necessary movement patterns. As a result, a warrior could walk in the dark just as confidently as in daylight. In addition to the pressure of the wind, they read the terrain directly through the soles of their moccasins. The desert soil is uneven and consists of dense clay, loose sand, and hard rocks. A storm smooths over these irregularities, but cannot change the hardness of the surface itself. The Native Americans knew the location of the rocky ridges and sand dunes in their region very well. They determined their location by how the density of the ground beneath their feet changed. Hard rocks signaled the approach of high ground or dry riverbeds. Soft, sinking sand indicated lowlands or open valleys. Every step provided new information for their internal navigator, adjusting their overall route. The combination of sensing the wind and reading the terrain allowed them to chart the most complex routes. They covered dozens of kilometers under conditions where others would simply have collapsed. This method prevented panic, which is the main enemy of a lost person. Panic causes people to run, waste energy, and ultimately lose their way. The Apaches moved steadily, conserving every movement and keeping a cool head. They viewed the storm not as an enemy, but as a temporary inconvenience that hid them from prying eyes. The sand became their ally, covering their tracks immediately after they left them. An important element of this navigation was the ability to maintain a steady stride rhythm. A disrupted pace led to a loss of balance and a distorted perception of the distance traveled. The warriors used rhythmic breathing to control their speed as they moved through the sand. They knew the length of their stride and could calculate the kilometers covered with great precision. This served as a substitute for maps and measuring instruments, which they never possessed. Even when traveling in a group, Each person navigated independently, relying on their own senses. They marched in a tight column, maintaining a minimal distance between one another. The guide set the pace, but each warrior following behind controlled the direction with their own body. If the lead warrior began to veer off course, those walking behind quickly noticed the change in wind pressure. They corrected the column's course without uttering a single word. This unique method of movement made the indigenous people true masters of the harsh wastelands. They turned the lack of visibility into a tactical advantage over any pursuer. Their ability to blend into the elements still amazes modern researchers of self-sufficient survival. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about this type of sensory navigation? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. The secret, for which people pay thousands, lies in proper breathing techniques during extreme air pollution. In a dense dust storm, the air is oversaturated with microscopic particles of quartz and fine dust. Taking a deep breath under such conditions instantly clogs the airways with dirt. A person begins to choke, cough, and lose precious moisture from the body. The Apache knew how to filter this aggressive flow using improvised means and special breathing techniques. They never opened their mouths while moving through the blowing sand. Breathing was done exclusively through the nose, which served as the first natural barrier against dust. The nasal passages trapped large particles, preventing them from penetrating deep into the lungs. To enhance this effect, they used thin strips of thick fabric or soft leather. These materials were tightly wrapped around the lower part of the face, creating a reliable filter. The fabric was not simply placed against the face. It was secured with a special knot at the back of the head. This prevented the mask from slipping due to strong gusts of wind and friction. It was important to maintain a small air pocket between the fabric and the lips. This pocket allowed the air to cool slightly and slow down before being inhaled. As a result, most of the dust settled on the outside of the protective mask. If no suitable fabric was at hand, natural materials were used instead. Warriors could use bundles of dry grass, which they first crushed in their palms. The grass filter was clamped between the teeth, and breathing was slowed to a steady, controlled rhythm. The grass fibers effectively trapped sand, while allowing enough oxygen to pass through for a steady pace. This method required patience, as breathing had to be very measured. The inhalation technique itself was also radically different from the usual way of breathing. They took short, shallow breaths, filling only the upper part of the chest. A deep breath created a strong suction that would penetrate any tissue barrier. Slow breathing minimized the inhalation of microscopic dust particles into the body. Exhalation, on the other hand, was done forcefully and sharply to push any trapped particles back out. The filter's moisture content played a crucial role in its filtration capacity. In the desert, water was a precious resource, and it was never wasted on wetting the bandages. Instead, the fabric was moistened naturally by condensation from the warrior's own breath. After just 10 minutes of active exhalation, the bandage became damp on the inside. The moisture bound the dust, forming an impermeable crust of dirt on the fabric. Periodically, this crust had to be removed so as not to block the flow of oxygen. The warrior carefully slid the mask aside, shook off the accumulated sand, and put it back in place. All of this was done on the move, without stopping or fussing. The skill of quickly cleaning the filter was practiced until it became second nature from an early age. This allowed one to remain in the very center of the storm for hours without experiencing oxygen deprivation. It was important to monitor one's heart rate during such a crossing. A rapid pulse demanded more oxygen, which forced a person to breathe more frequently and deeply. The Apaches walked at a measured pace that did not cause severe physical exhaustion. They deliberately slowed their rhythm so that their breathing remained steady and calm. This composure saved their lives in situations where an unprepared traveler would have suffocated from panic. After the storm ended, the process of clearing their airways was also unique. They did not remove their face coverings immediately, allowing the dust suspended in the air to settle completely to the ground. A sudden transition to clean air could cause spasms and severe coughing. Gradually removing the protection allowed their lungs to adapt smoothly to the new environmental conditions. Then they rinsed their mouths and noses with a small amount of stored water. The ability to breathe properly under extreme conditions was the foundation of the indigenous people's survival. Their lungs were trained to cope with stresses that would be unbearable for the average person. They transformed their bodies into perfect mechanisms for filtering the desert air. This practice was passed down from generation to generation as a treasure of the highest value. Do you think modern respirators could surpass this simple and reliable protection technique? And are you ready to learn how they protected their eyes? What you've never seen before is how they protected their eyesight in strong winds. Sand blowing at high speeds acts as an abrasive. Tiny grains of sand can seriously damage the cornea in a matter of minutes. The Native Americans did not have glass eyeglasses or transparent plastic face shields. They had to rely on their physiology and ingenious devices made from natural materials. Their own eyelashes and a specific way of squinting served as their first line of defense. They never tried to look into the storm with their eyes wide open. Their eye slits narrowed to a thin line, letting in a minimum of light and dust. Their thick eyelashes intertwined, forming a natural screen in front of the pupil. This barrier blocked most of the large grains of sand flying directly into their faces. To enhance protection, they used dark paint applied to their cheekbones and under their eyes. This paint was made from a mixture of charcoal and animal fat. It acted as an anti-glare coating, reducing the strain on the optic nerve in bright, diffused light. In addition, the paint's sticky base trapped some of the dust blowing upward from below. As a result, the area around the eyes remained relatively clean for a long time. A more elaborate device was the homemade visor, woven from stiff plant fibers. It was secured to the forehead with a leather strap or a strip of fabric. The visor extended forward by several centimeters, creating a canopy over the eyes. It provided reliable protection against vertical streams of sand falling from above. When the head was tilted forward, this canopy completely shielded the upper half of the face from the headwind. If a storm reached catastrophic proportions, the warriors would fashion something resembling snow goggles. A narrow strip was cut from a piece of thick leather or tree bark. Two very narrow horizontal slits were cut into it, directly in front of the eyes. This bandage fit snugly against the face, completely preventing sand from entering from the sides. Visibility through such goggles was minimal, but they were guaranteed to protect their eyesight. Constant friction and dryness caused irritation of the eye's mucous membrane. To avoid inflammation, they used natural lubrication and frequent blinking. Blinking was not a reflexive action, but a fully controlled and rhythmic process. It helped distribute tear fluid evenly and wash the tiniest specks of dust toward the corners of the eyes. From there, the debris was carefully removed with the little finger to avoid damaging the eyeball. It was important not to rub the eyes with one's hands, even if sand had already gotten inside. Rubbing only drove sharp quartz particles deeper into the corneal tissue. If a grain of sand caused pain, the warrior would induce copious tears by closing his eyes tightly. The flow of tears naturally washed away the foreign body without mechanical intervention. This iron discipline saved hundreds of people from blindness over the course of many centuries. They also used the design features of their headgear to create shade. The wide brims of improvised hats made from animal hides or tightly tied scarves protected the upper part of the face. During strong gusts, they simply lowered the brims as far as possible. This forced the wind to curve around their heads, preventing it from blowing directly into their eye sockets. Air vortices carried the sand off to the sides, leaving the area in front of the face relatively calm. After emerging from the storm zone, the eyes required thorough care and rinsing. For this purpose, decoctions of soothing herbs prepared in advance were used. Rinsing relieved redness and prevented inflammation caused by dirt that had gotten into the eyes. This process was a mandatory ritual that concluded any long journey through the storm. Only after this could a warrior allow himself to relax and open his eyes fully. The ability to preserve eyesight in such harsh conditions is striking in its simplicity and effectiveness. Their methods did not require advanced technology, but were based on a deep understanding of human anatomy. The physics of the wind were also taken into account when designing any element of protective clothing. This practical wisdom was forged over millennia of harsh life in the continent's unforgiving climate. Like this video, if you're impressed by the ingenuity of the indigenous peoples of the Americas. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in their specialized clothing. Ordinary clothing was completely useless for protecting the body from whipping sand. Grains of sand flying at tremendous speeds pierced thin fabrics and left abrasions on the skin. The indigenous peoples used multi-layered suits that provided reliable armor against the elements. Each layer served a specific purpose and was made from specific materials. The base layer was always thick yet soft suede, made from deer hide. This material was highly breathable, preventing the body from overheating during arduous treks. The suede fit snugly around the torso and legs, leaving no folds where sand could accumulate. The absence of seams in areas of friction protected the skin from severe irritation. The soft surface of the leather absorbed the kinetic energy of impacts from fine grains of sand. Over the base layer, they wore loose capes or shirts made of coarser hide. These capes had fringe along the edges of the sleeves and the hem of the shirt. The fringe was not merely decorative, it served an important practical purpose. The fluttering strips of leather broke up the dense wind currents, reducing their force before they struck the body. They created a zone of turbulence around the person, deflecting the sand to the sides. Footwear played a critical role in traversing sand-covered terrain. Classic high moccasins made of thick leather were lined with additional pieces of fur. The seams of the moccasins were carefully coated with animal fat or plant resin. This completely sealed the footwear, preventing fine dust from penetrating inside to the feet. The fur on the upper part of the boot trapped dirt trying to get in from above. Special attention was paid to protecting the neck and collar area. That was where sand would get in the fastest, causing excruciating discomfort. Warriors used wide scarves or pieces of soft leather, wrapping them tightly around their necks. The ends of the scarf were tucked under their outer garments, creating an impenetrable seal. This protection allowed them to turn their heads freely, without risking a mouthful of sand down their throats. Pants often had elongated legs that completely covered the tops of the boots. At the bottom, they were secured with tight leather straps around the ankles. This simple technique created a continuous line of protection from the waist down to the soles of the feet. The wind blowing against their legs simply glided over the smooth leather, finding no gaps. Any gap in the clothing would instantly turn into a pocket filled with heavy sand. The hands also required protection, as they were constantly used to feel for obstacles or adjust bandages. To this end, elongated sleeves were used that completely concealed the hands. If necessary, a warrior could pull his hand out through a special slit on the inside of the sleeve. The rest of the time, his hands remained in a warm and protected space. The skin on his hands did not dry out or crack from the wind's abrasive effects. It is important to note that all of this clothing was meticulously designed to cope with extreme heat. During the day in a sandstorm, temperatures could reach extremely high levels. The loose fit of the outer layer created an air pocket that prevented overheating. Sweat evaporated, cooling the body, while the thick leather kept out the hot outside air. It functioned as a sort of thermos, maintaining the body's optimal temperature. After each trek, all equipment underwent thorough cleaning and inspection. Sand mercilessly wore down the seams and thinned even the highest quality leather. They would beat the clothing with sticks to dislodge deeply embedded dust from the fibers. Damaged areas were immediately patched so that the outfit would always be ready for the next challenge. Caring for their clothing was tantamount to caring for their own health and lives. This multi-layered approach to protecting the body demonstrates the highest level of adaptation. The Native Americans did not attempt to change nature. They adapted their technologies to its harsh rules. Their outfits were the pinnacle of utilitarian design, with not a single superfluous detail. Every fringe and every seam served a single purpose: survival in extreme conditions. Want to know how they found shelter in completely open terrain? Sometimes a sandstorm would gain such force that it became impossible to continue moving. The wind could knock a person off their feet and roll heavy rocks across the ground. In such critical situations, the only chance of survival was to quickly create shelter. The Apaches possessed a unique ability to find or build shelters where the landscape appeared completely flat. They used the slightest irregularities in the terrain to set up temporary protection. The simplest shelter was a small hollow or a dry creek bed. A warrior would lie down at the bottom of such a depression, which was usually below the level of the prevailing wind. Dense air masses swept overhead, leaving only small eddies at the bottom. The man would lie on his side, pulling his knees up to his chest to conserve heat. He would cover himself with a thick leather cloak, which served as the roof of this makeshift shelter. If the terrain was perfectly flat, they had to literally dig a shelter into the ground. The Native Americans used sturdy sticks or flat stones to quickly remove the topsoil. They dug a shallow trench, adjusting its length to fit a person's height. The excavated soil was piled up on the windward side, creating a small protective embankment. Behind this embankment, a safe zone was formed, large enough to weather the worst of the storm. If there were shrubs or dense clumps of dry grass, the process was greatly simplified. The plants themselves served as an excellent barrier, breaking up the streams of rushing sand. The warrior would lie down right at the base of a shrub, weaving his clothing into its branches. The root system held the plant securely in the ground, preventing it from being blown away. The person blended into the landscape, becoming a small, inconspicuous mound in the middle of the desert. Sometimes large boulders or rocky outcrops served as cover. It was important to correctly assess the aerodynamics of the obstacle and choose the right side to rest on. Shelter was always set up on the leeward side, where the wind curved around the rock. The Native Americans knew that sand accumulated most quickly at a specific point behind the boulder. They chose a spot slightly farther from this area, so they wouldn't be buried up to their heads. Group shelters were built according to the principle of a circular defense against the wind. Several warriors would lie down in a circle, their backs touching, and cover themselves with shared animal hides. The outer edge of this circle bore the brunt of the elements. Inside, a small space was formed, where the warmth of human bodies was retained. This formation allowed people to sleep in shifts, while those on watch monitored the level of the blowing sand. Their own camping gear was also often used as shelter. If the detachment had horses, the animals were made to lie down on the ground in a tight row. People hid behind the horses' backs, using their massive bodies as a living wall. The horses instinctively lowered their heads and closed their nostrils, patiently enduring the storm. It was a symbiotic relationship in which humans and animals helped each other survive under the harshest conditions. An essential skill was knowing how to avoid being completely buried under a sand dune. A sandstorm could deposit a meter-thick layer of sand in a matter of hours, turning a shelter into a grave. Therefore, a person lying on the ground had to keep moving constantly, shaking off the accumulating sand. Slight movements of the shoulders and legs prevented the sand from compacting around the body. This required constant concentration, even in a state of deep exhaustion. The quality of the cloak played a decisive role in the success of this passive survival strategy. Bison hide or thick fabric kept out the dust and protected against sudden temperature changes. The edges of the cloak were tucked tightly against the body, preventing any drafts. A microclimate formed inside, stuffy but completely safe. The person simply waited until nature calmed down and allowed them to continue on their way. The choice of shelter always depended on wind speed and the nature of the terrain. These decisions had to be made in a matter of seconds, as the storm would engulf the travelers in an instant. Choosing the wrong spot could cost a life, so intuition and experience were the main guides. The ability to lie low and wait out the storm was a sign of wisdom, not weakness. The ability to blend into the landscape was just as important as the ability to walk across it. I will reveal the best-kept secret behind their phenomenal endurance in arid climates. A sandstorm dehydrates the human body several times faster than the scorching sun. The dry wind draws moisture out through the skin, breath, and mucous membranes at an alarming rate. An ordinary traveler in such conditions begins to drink water in large gulps, quickly depleting their supplies. The indigenous people had a completely different approach to maintaining water balance during an extreme storm. They strictly forbade themselves from drinking water while actively moving through the storm. Consuming fluids on the move led to profuse sweating, which accelerated overall dehydration. The water simply passed through the body without providing the necessary benefits or relief. Instead, they used a technique of minimal oral hydration. This alleviated the critical sensation of thirst without depleting valuable resources from their travel water bags. To stimulate saliva production, the warriors placed a small, smooth pebble under their tongues. This method caused the salivary glands to work more actively, constantly moistening their parched throats. The pebble mimicked the presence of food or water, tricking the brain's receptors. The smooth pebble did not damage tooth enamel and was completely safe while walking. This simple trick allowed them to walk for hours without touching their water flasks at all. Sometimes, small pieces of dried roots from local plants were used instead of a pebble. Agave or yucca roots had a slightly astringent taste and helped retain moisture. When chewed for a long time, they released microscopic doses of juice that nourished the mucous membranes. The plant fibers retained saliva, preventing it from being swallowed too quickly. This ensured a lasting sense of comfort in the mouth, even in the very heart of a dry storm. Water skins were made from the thick stomachs of large animals, or from tightly sewn leather. They were never carried out in the open air, where the wind could dry them out. The water bags were hidden deep beneath the warrior's clothing, pressed against the cooler parts of his body. This protected the water from heating up and prevented it from evaporating through the material's microscopic pores. The cool water retained its refreshing properties for much longer. Drinking was permitted only during long stops in sheltered areas. Water was consumed in microscopic sips so that the body could absorb every drop. The liquid was swirled around in the mouth for a long time, moistening the gums and palate before swallowing. This ritual stretched on for several minutes, bringing maximum satisfaction to the exhausted body. Not a single drop was to be spilled past the mouth or absorbed into the sand. They also knew how to extract liquid from edible cacti found along the way. If a storm caught them near a bunch of thickets, they would cut off the succulent stems. The cactus pulp contained a lot of viscous liquid that was excellent for quenching thirst. They chewed it carefully, sucking out the moisture, and simply spat out the tough fibers. This conserved their supply of clean water for the more challenging sections of the route. An important rule was not to eat during a severe sandstorm. Digestion requires a huge amount of water from the body's internal reserves. Eating dried meat or nuts would instantly cause an overwhelming thirst. The Native Americans preferred to go without food for several days just to maintain a normal water balance. Food was consumed only after leaving the extreme climatic zone. Washing one's face while on the move was strictly forbidden, as water was valued more highly than gold. Sand and dust covered their faces and hands with a thick layer of gray grime. Over time, this layer began to serve as additional protection against evaporation. The grime clogged the pores, preventing moisture loss through the skin's surface. The warriors would wash off this mask only after reaching full-flowing rivers or reliable springs. Their attitude toward water was based on the deepest respect and the strictest discipline. Every drop was carefully accounted for and used with maximum efficiency. This survival system had been tested by hundreds of generations who had crossed the great wastelands. Their discipline allowed them to undertake treks that would have been unthinkable for colonizers or a regular army. Would you like to know how they communicated with one another in this roaring, sandy hell? In a sandstorm, the wind howls with deafening force, drowning out all other sounds. A human voice is lost at arm's length, turning into an indistinct squeak. Shouting in such conditions is completely useless and even dangerous for the respiratory tract. The Apaches developed a complex system of silent communication to coordinate the squad's actions. This system relied on tactile signals, gestures, and the use of special objects. The basis of communication in tight formation was a system of rope ties and physical contact. Warriors often tied themselves together with a single long leather strap secured to their belts. The tension in this strap served as the main indicator of speed and direction of movement. A sharp tug on the rope signaled an immediate halt for the entire unit. Two short tugs signaled a command to quicken the pace or change the leader of the column. If the rope was not in use, they conveyed commands by touching each other's shoulders. The warrior walking behind would place a hand on the shoulder of the comrade walking ahead. A light tap on the right shoulder signaled the need to move to that side. A firm press with both hands forced the person to drop to the ground immediately. This continuous tactile connection turned the group into a single, unified entity. At short distances, when visibility was at least a couple of meters, gestures were used. The indigenous people's sign language was incredibly rich and detailed. A single hand movement could convey a complex message about danger or a change in route. The gestures were broad and sharp, so they would stand out against the gray haze of sand. A wave of the hand above the head served as a signal to stop for those who were not tied to the rope. To attract attention over slightly longer distances, noise-making instruments were used. The shrill whistles made from bone cut through the low rumble of the sandy wind. The whistle's high-pitched sound did not blend in with the noise of the elements. Different pitches and durations of the whistle encoded basic commands for the squad. This sound could be heard even through protective cloths, tightly wrapped around the ears. The squad leader always wore the most striking piece of clothing or equipment. It might be a bright feather attached to a headdress or a long spear. The spear was raised high, serving as a beacon for the rest of the group. Even in thick dust, the dark silhouette of the tall shaft remained visible. The warriors used this marker to stay oriented, preventing the formation from stretching out or falling apart. When the group was forced to split up to seek cover, they left physical markers. Stones were arranged on the ground in the shape of arrows or small pyramids. Bush branches were snapped at a specific angle, indicating the direction of travel. These signs were understood only by their own people and did not attract the attention of outsiders. They served as guiding threads for those who fell behind or lost their way. Advanced planning of any crossing played a crucial role in communication. Before entering the storm zone, The warriors discussed the route and possible rendezvous points in detail. Each person knew the ultimate goal and the procedure to follow in the event of a sudden separation. This eliminated the need for complex coordination during moments of critical danger. The unit operated like a well-oiled machine, with each member knowing their task. At night, the storm made travel conditions utterly unbearable. Visibility dropped to zero, and the group shifted to a tight circular formation. Communication took place solely by passing signals hand-to-hand along a chain. They conveyed the direction of movement through finger squeezes, without breaking contact. This focus on tactile sensations sharpened their senses to the limit. The seamless coordination of their communication allowed them to execute complex maneuvers right in the midst of the storm. They could set up ambushes or retreat covertly, coordinating the actions of dozens of people. The colonizers' army, deprived of the bugler's familiar commands, descended into utter chaos in the storm. The Apaches, however, turned the howling wind into a shield that concealed their silent negotiations. Their tactics proved that true mutual understanding requires no loud words. The psychological pressure of a sandstorm often proves more devastating than the physical factors involved. The endless howling of the wind, the oppressive grayness, and the loss of bearings drive people mad. Lost travelers begin to experience panic attacks and make fatal mistakes. The Apaches possessed a unique mental fortitude that allowed them to endure these trials with icy composure. Their survival mindset was shaped from early childhood through rigorous training. They perceived the storm not as a hostile force, but as a natural part of their world. They believed that the wind cleansed the earth and hid them from the eyes of their enemies. This philosophical attitude relieved inner tension and fear of the unknown. A warrior accepted the elements without trying to fight what could not be defeated by force. He simply dissolved into them, becoming a tiny grain of sand in the vast cycle of nature. To maintain clarity of mind, they used techniques of deep concentration and meditation. Hiding from the howling wind, the warrior would enter a trance-like state. He would tune out external noise, focusing on the rhythm of his heartbeat. This allowed his brain to rest and avoid wasting energy on pointless anxiety. A person could remain in this state for hours, maintaining complete control over his emotions. An important factor in psychological resilience was absolute trust in the squad leader. No one questioned the chosen direction or the decision to stop. This unwavering discipline prevented arguments and panic within the isolated group. Everyone knew that their lives were in the hands of the tribe's most experienced tracker. The leader's calmness automatically spread to all the other warriors following behind. During long marches, they kept their minds occupied with monotonous, repetitive thoughts. The warriors might mentally count their steps or repeat traditional rhythms to themselves. This mental routine distracted their consciousness from physical discomfort and the pain in their chafed feet. The brain focused on a simple task, ignoring the chaos of their surroundings. This kind of self-regulation forms the basis of many modern survival techniques used by special forces. They never thought about the ultimate goal of the journey while in the midst of the storm. Their focus was always on overcoming the specific stretch of the path at hand. Thinking about how much further they still had to go could quickly break their will. The warrior concentrated only on the next step and on maintaining the correct direction. This tactic saved the mind from despair in the face of the endless storm. Surviving alone in the storm demanded even greater psychological resilience. A person was left face to face with their fears in absolute darkness. In such cases, a connection with ancestors and the guardian spirits of one's clan provided solace. The warrior mentally turned to them for support, sensing their invisible presence nearby. Faith gave him the immense inner strength necessary to overcome panic. The sense of time is severely distorted during a storm. Minutes seem like long, exhausting hours. Indigenous people knew how to gauge time, using their body's internal biological clocks. They relied on feelings of hunger, muscle fatigue, and natural sleep cycles. This helped them roughly gauge how much time had passed since the storm began. Maintaining a sense of time restored their control over the situation. Emerging from the storm was always seen as a rebirth and a source of pride. The hardships of the ordeal strengthened a warrior's standing within his community. The experience of overcoming the elements was passed down to the young through instructive stories told around the campfire. These tales instilled in new generations a spirit of resilience and fearlessness in the face of nature. Their psychological armor was forged over the years and was stronger than any steel. Their mental resilience was just as important a weapon as a bow or a knife. It allowed them to act rationally where others simply surrendered to fate. A calm mind conserved physical strength, directing it only toward necessary movements. It was a triumph of human will over the blind fury of the boundless desert. The story of their survival proves the superiority of the spirit over any external circumstances. A sandstorm radically alters the landscape, erasing all familiar trails and landmarks. Dunes shift by tens of meters, burying old water sources and deep ravines. For the American cavalry, emerging from the storm meant a complete loss of orientation in the terrain. The Apaches, however, could read the transformed desert as easily as an open book. They used the subtlest clues to pinpoint their exact location. The first thing they did after the dust settled was to observe the behavior of local animals. Wild animals and insects emerged from their hiding places to find water and food. The direction of movement of the desert's inhabitants unerringly pointed to the nearest water sources or rock formations. The movements of lizards and snakes helped determine the firmness of the ground and the proximity of rocky ridges. The surrounding world became a reliable and free natural compass for the warriors. The ability to read the patterns of fresh sand deposits played a huge role. The wind shaped sand dunes according to strict aerodynamic laws, creating gentle and steep slopes. By observing these slopes, it was possible to accurately determine the direction in which the main body of the sandstorm was moving. This knowledge helped them adjust their route and calculate their deviation from their original destination. The geometry of the sand held all the information about the natural cataclysm that had just occurred. They carefully studied the exposed layers of soil in the weathered areas of the desert. Strong winds often stripped away the topsoil, revealing previously hidden rocky outcrops. By the color and structure of these rocks, the trackers could tell which part of the region they were in. Each valley had its own unique geological composition, familiar to them since childhood. These rocks served as landmarks at the crossroads of the vast wastelands. The scents carried by the fresh wind after a storm also conveyed important information. The Native Americans' keen sense of smell allowed them to detect the scent of moisture from many kilometers away. The scent of certain shrubs indicated their approach to the foothills or seasonal rivers. Dust no longer clogged their nostrils, and the world was filled with thousands of useful scents. A warrior would literally sniff out the right path home amid the endless sands. If a storm caught them while pursuing the enemy, they quickly regained the trail. Soldiers believed that the wind completely obliterated the prints of hooves and heavy army boots. However, beneath the layer of fresh sand, the tightly packed soil retained the indentations left by footsteps. The Indians carefully brushed away the top layer of dust in suspicious areas, uncovering hidden tracks. This technique terrified those who thought they were safely hidden. The army's very movement left behind a multitude of clues that were imperceptible at first glance. A broken shrub branch or a displaced heavy rock could not have been moved by the wind. An experienced tracker could spot these anomalies in the natural chaos with astonishing precision. From these small details, he pieced together a clear path of the enemy unit's movement. The pursuit resumed so quickly, it was as if the storm had never happened. They knew how to use objects displaced by the wind to create new traps. Windswept dunes created false crossings or concealed dangerous rocky crevices. The Apaches could deliberately drive a cavalry detachment into such an insurmountable obstacle. The soldiers moved across sand that appeared level and sank into hidden pits. Nature itself became a weapon in the hands of skilled tacticians. Their sense of coordination recovered very quickly after a long period of sensory deprivation. Their eyes instantly adjusted to the bright sun after hours spent in the gray haze. Their hearing once again began to pick up the faintest rustles of the desert, warning them of any danger. Their bodies shook off their numbness and returned to their usual agile and swift rhythm of movement. This transition took only a few minutes, thanks to their high level of physical conditioning. Interpreting the transformed landscape required a phenomenal memory and an analytical mind. The tracker had to compare what he had seen before the storm with what remained afterward. This art made them true ghosts of the desert, elusive and all-seeing. No natural disasters could halt their confident advance across their native land. They always returned home, no matter how difficult the trials. Studying the Apache's survival methods offers a completely different perspective on human capabilities. Their techniques were not based on complex tools or technological superiority over nature. On the contrary, they relied on a deep understanding of the physical and biological laws of their region. Every action they took was dictated by the iron logic of utility and maximum efficiency. Not a single drop of energy was wasted in the struggle against the elements. Modern survival instructors continue to analyze this unique historical experience to this day. Many principles of tactile navigation and water conservation are incorporated into training programs. The military adopts the art of maintaining composure and rationally allocating resources in critical situations. However, it is practically impossible to fully replicate the indigenous people's success without extensive training. This requires a change in the very way of thinking and perceiving the surrounding world. For the U.S. Army, these desert warriors became the most challenging and enigmatic adversary. The soldiers fought against people, but they were defeated by the very territory those people were defending. The cavalry was hampered by heavy equipment and the strict regulations of the European military school. They tried to subdue the desert, while the Native Americans simply lived in harmony with it. This conceptual difference determined the outcome of many long and grueling campaigns. Clothing, masks, and breathing techniques demonstrate a perfect balance between humans and their environment. Indigenous peoples created a perfect protective system from what nature provided them. Leather, grass, bones, and animal fat served as substitutes for synthetic materials and fabrics. These organic components performed their function better than many industrial counterparts of the time. Their gear was lightweight, affordable, and incredibly reliable in use. Their ability to find shelter where none exists is a source of admiration for geographers. The ability to blend into the terrain required a perfect understanding of wind aerodynamics and soil structure. This proves that they possessed a highly developed empirical understanding of the laws of physics. They did not record this knowledge in textbooks, but passed it down through generations through practical experience. Each new generation honed these skills, refining them to absolute perfection. Their system of silent communication is a masterpiece of tactical coordination in its own right. In conditions of zero visibility and deafening noise, they operated as a single, coordinated organism. This required the highest level of trust and empathy within the social group. Such cohesion allowed them to survive in conditions where a lone individual would have been doomed. Mutual aid and discipline were at the forefront of their value system. Their ability to read the landscape after a storm demonstrates their phenomenal powers of observation. They saw the world in the finest details that escaped the notice of European settlers. Every broken branch or displaced rock was an open book to them. This connection to the land was not merely a skill, but the foundation of their worldview and culture. They considered themselves an integral part of this harsh yet majestic natural world. Surviving a sandstorm was just one of many trials they faced in their lives. They also successfully coped with extreme heat, cold, and a constant shortage of resources. Their bodies were adapted to stresses that would have broken an unprepared person. This resilience was forged over millennia of life in the confined space of an arid continent. They were the true masters of their territory until the arrival of European civilization. Today, their methods serve as a reminder of just how far modern humans have drifted from nature. We have grown accustomed to relying on gadgets and artificial life support systems in every situation. Comfort often makes us weak and dependent on external sources of energy and information. By studying the experiences of indigenous peoples, we can rediscover the hidden reserves of our own bodies. This historical lesson is important for understanding our own physical and mental limits. Their story teaches us to respect the forces of nature and the importance of adaptation. It is impossible to defeat the elements by force, but we can learn to use them to our advantage. The art of survival lies not in struggle, but in flexibility and understanding the rules of the game. The experience of these elusive desert warriors will forever remain in the annals of human history. This legacy deserves to be thoroughly studied and preserved for future generations of researchers. Which of these survival techniques do you think would be most useful in today's extreme conditions? Suggest topics for future videos you'd like to see on our channel in the comments. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new videos.